नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन इति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. A very warm welcome to all of you on the final day of Srila Prabhupada Lila, the final instruction. Srila Prabhupada announced in Rishikesh that I want to leave my body, the end is near. So overnight the disciples packed up everything and they took him to Vrindavan. But from Vrindavan, as suggested by his disciples, Srila Prabhupada became very enthusiastic to travel to London. Even though Srila Prabhupada can barely walk, he is very, very weak. But his disciple told him that, no Prabhupada, you please come. If you travel to the West, seeing the love of your disciples, you will continue to stay. And you need not talk, you need not walk, simply your presence gives them enthusiasm. And thus it gives you also great delight. We have our own farm and our own food, and your health will be very nice over there. So Prabhupada, with the mood of, again, another preaching mission to strengthen his mission, Prabhupada became very enthusiastic and started thinking about Radha Londonishwara, the presiding deities of London, his rooms, his ashram in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada commented, the good days, I think good time is coming. When Prabhupada arrived in London, his disciples there were shocked. They had never imagined that he would be so thin or that anyone could travel in such condition. For the devotees who had been at the airport to meet him, it had been a heart-rending experience. Even those who had heard the reports of Prabhupada in Vrindavan were not emotionally prepared for such a change. Prabhupada was as transcendental as ever, or even more than ever, but the devotees were shocked at first to see him so different. Now he appeared like a powerful sage who had been undergoing long austerities for the benefit of humankind, and who had become transcendental to his body, although living within it. Srila Prabhupada's visit to London gave the devotees great hope for his recovery. Srila Prabhupada looked forward to traveling to America shortly after Janmashtami, which would fall on September 6, 2 weeks from the date of his arrival in England. I want to live a little longer, he said, to make everything more perfect. His disciple asked, will you do this by enthusing the devotees by staying with them, or is there a specific program? A specific program, said Srila Prabhupada. I want to introduce Varnashrama. At our Pennsylvania farm, the biggest problem of life is solved, food. He considered the establishing of the model Vedic social system on his corn farm communities as an important unfinished part of his life's mission. But after Prabhupada had been in London 2 weeks, on the day after his birthday celebration, his health suddenly became much worse. So Prabhupada planned to expand the second phase of his movement. First of all, Prabhupada wanted to revive the Brahminical culture. There should be some men who are well versed in the knowledge of Vedas, and thus, by their directions, again, everything could be brought back to normal. But not everyone can be expected to dedicate their life to Krishna. So another feature, Varnashrama system, is also important, where people can have a very simple life, where people can be demonstrated how there is no need of such hard labor of 10 hours, 12 hours every day. Simply, if you have little land and cow, you can live completely free from all anxieties. You can have fresh air, fresh water, very natural, very peaceful life. Bull is used to till the field, and you have your own food, you have your own clothes over there, and you are completely independent of whatever is happening in the world. There is crisis in the economy, there are bombings happening, there is any kind of famine, you are completely independent. And thus, this peaceful situation is very favorable for Krishna consciousness. If there is no peace, there is no time, how a person can understand? When the mind is so disturbed, it is very difficult to assimilate the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. But Prabhupada's health started failing again. This was the first crisis since his coming to England, and suddenly his plans changed. Instead of going to the United States as he had planned, he now requested that he be taken back to India. He spoke of Bombay. If I live a few days more, he said, let me see the opening of the Bombay temple. We can wait here and then fly to Bombay. I have worked so hard for it. If I see the opening and then die, it will be a very peaceful death. And if I live, then I can come back here. Srila Prabhupada went to Bombay, but his health was not improving. Finally, he announced that he would rather return to Krishna Balram in Vrindavan than continue staying in such critical condition in Bombay. But Srila Prabhupada said, Tamal Krishna, what will happen to all the devotees here? They have been serving you so sincerely. How will they be able to open the temple without you being here? I mean, all the devotees, when they hear you are going to Vrindavan, they will want to come. They won't want to stay here. Then they will all want to leave their posts and come with you to Vrindavan. Yes, then let them come, said Srila Prabhupada. I have no objection. Tamal Krishna mentioned that if 1,000 devotees might come to be with Prabhupada, that would slow down the ISKCON work all over the world. Prabhupada again said he had no objection. Tamal Krishna asked whether it was compulsory for the GBC members to come, and Prabhupada affirmed that it was. So Prabhupada had decided he is going to finish his pastimes in the mortal world. The devotees at the Krishna Balram Mandir were upset to see that Prabhupada's condition had deteriorated so much in the 1 month he had been away. His room was as he had left it, except for the addition of a large double bed. He lay down and they closed the curtains and dimmed the lights. For about 5 minutes he lay still with his eyes closed. Now you are home, Srila Prabhupada, said Tamal Krishna. Still, Srila Prabhupada lay quietly, not moving. Then slowly he brought his hands to his chest, clasped them together, and said, Thank you. He seemed relieved. Now you are in the care of Krishna Balram, said Tamal Krishna. Srila Prabhupada smiled and nodded slightly. Yes, he said, Krishna Tvadiya Padapankaja Panjarantam, indicating King Kula Shekhar's prayers. My dear Krishna, please help me die immediately, so that the swan of my mind may be encircled by the stem of your lotus feet. Otherwise, at the time of my final breath, how will it be possible for me to think of you? Although Srila Prabhupada was in a precarious state, he remained completely fixed in thought of Krishna in one way or another. Krishna's name, his form, his pastimes, or his devotional service. Prabhupada suggested going to see Krishna Balram at 9:30, just as he had done before, but his servants advised that he rest today and begin the program tomorrow. Whatever you desire, I will do, Prabhupada said. Tamal Krishna asked Prabhupada if he wanted the Kaviraj to come. Kaviraj means the Ayurvedic doctor. As you said, Prabhupada, for better or worse, some husband must be there. Srila Prabhupada nodded. Now manage everything, he said, and let me think of Krishna Balram. In response to Srila Prabhupada's call, the 23 GBC members again began gathering in Vrindavan. They arrived heavy-hearted, yet on coming before Srila Prabhupada, they were pleased to give him progress reports on their preaching on his behalf. Srila Prabhupada was happy to hear the reports and was as encouraging as ever to his leaders, despite his condition. Actually, Prabhupada calling the GBC men together had been so that they could chant for him. Now more than ever, he wanted the medicine of the holy name, not of the doctors. When he heard that his friend Dr. Ghosh was coming to Vrindavan to open a clinic there, and he suggested if I can treat Prabhupada, Prabhupada told, no, I don't want to see any doctor. Let him come to do the clinic work, but not for my treatment. These doctors will come and give something to try and save, he said. I don't want to be saved. Dr. Ghosh may come for the clinic he wants to develop, but not for my treatment. Tamal Krishna asked if they could at least call in some local Vrindavan doctors. No, said Prabhupada. Let us take your advice for Kirtan only. Tamal Krishna agreed that Kirtan was best because in that way they were pleading for Krishna's help. So he suggested it is good because the disciples also are advancing in that way. But Prabhupada's answer was different. Better you don't pray to Krishna to save me, said Srila Prabhupada. Let me die now. This first time Prabhupada had spoken. Before he always told that please save my spiritual master if you so desire, cure my spiritual master if you so desire. But now Prabhupada told, better you don't pray to Krishna to save me, let me die now. When Harikesh had received the call to come immediately to Vrindavan, he had been told to expect the worst. Immediately he had contacted his printer who was in the process of completing several books and told him that he must have advance copies by the next day. So by the time he got on the plane for India, he had newly printed volumes of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in German, the Krishna trilogy in German, and a Yugoslavian Sri Ishopanishad. Harikesh went in and showed Prabhupada the 7 new books. Immediately Prabhupada took the first volume of the Krishna trilogy and held it up, looking at the cover painting of Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada began crying and reached out, trying to stroke Harikesha's head. Harikesh reached out and held Srila Prabhupada's hand, thinking himself unworthy of being patted. He was rotting here, typewriting, said Srila Prabhupada, referring to when Harikesh had been his secretary, just before going to preach in Europe. I said, you go. I had 10 servants. You thought that I was degrading you by sending you away. No, now you understand? Yes, I understand, said Harikesh, sobbing. Here is an intelligent boy, I thought, said Srila Prabhupada. Why should he rot here, typewriting? Prabhupada looked at each book. Printing and everything first class, he said. He asked, how many had been printed? And Harikesh replied, 120,000 Krishna trilogies, 60,000 Srimad Bhagavatam second cantos, and 10,000 Ishopanishads. Can you distribute that Ishopanishad? Prabhupada asked. Because Ishopanishad was meant for Yugoslavia and other such Eastern European countries where it was very, very risky to distribute the books. But at his personal risk, he was distributing. So Prabhupada asked, will you be able to distribute it? Harikesh assured Prabhupada that they could definitely distribute the book in Yugoslavia. Then print more, said Prabhupada. They continued discussing book production. Books were indeed Srila Prabhupada's life and soul. From Harikesh entering with these new books, Prabhupada had felt a profound ecstasy that he had spread to Harikesh and all the devotees present. Everyone was keenly aware that what they were experiencing was transcendental, a special reciprocation with Srila Prabhupada, and as long as they were sincere, it would not die. So devotees could immediately experience another ecstasy. So how important the books were to Prabhupada, even in his final stages. Prabhupada was coming in ecstasy hearing of the publication and distribution of his new books. And that ecstasy would spread to everybody. And everybody in the room, they realized this presence of ecstasy. And they understood this is how Prabhupada is reciprocating. So thus the spiritual happiness is a factual phenomena. Just like any happiness of eating something nice, hearing some nice music, or watching some beautiful form. In a similar fashion, spiritual happiness is real happiness. And thus, these realizations solidified strong faith of the devotees in the words of their spiritual master. Now you just have to become better, said Harikesh. More healthy. Healthy? Said Srila Prabhupada. I have nothing to do with this body. Srila Prabhupada was becoming more and more in favor of departing from the world. When Tamal Krishna remarked that Prabhupada was not drinking much, he replied that he had no inclination. Then Srila Prabhupada said they should consult Narayan Maharaj, a disciple of Prabhupada's sannyas guru, for details on how to conduct the ceremony for a departed Vaishnava. He also described where his samadhi should be located and asked that after his departure, a feast be served in all the main temples in Vrindavan, with ISKCON bearing the expense. On one level, everything seemed to go on as usual. The October weather was very pleasant. The Gurukul boys were continuing with their routine, and the deity worship went on as usual. But in front of the temple, workmen began clearing a space for Prabhupada's samadhi. As part of his instruction and example, Srila Prabhupada knew he would have to show people just how to die. He had escaped death a number of times by Krishna's grace, by the prayers of his disciples, and by his own pure and powerful will to propagate his movement. But from the signs given to him by Lord Krishna in 1977, Srila Prabhupada began decisively and conclusively ending his mission in the material world. And among his final duties was his giving complete guidelines on how to die. He was perfectly showing how to do that which everyone has to do, but which is most difficult to do successfully, that is to die. Srila Prabhupada had deferred the lessons in dying in favor of giving his disciples an unparalleled opportunity to serve him in pure and simple love. So although Prabhupada had decided to impart this final instruction, so the pure devotees are completely transcendental. Arche Vishnu Shiladhir Guru Shundar Matir, as we will see. So spiritual master should never be considered a human being or a man. When a disciple, he brought an article in the praise of Srila Prabhupada, and the article stated, "This great man changed the world." Prabhupada chastised him. Spiritual master should not be called a man. So spiritual master is a Vaikuntha personality belonging to spiritual world. But he behaves like a man, a human being of this planet, so that he can teach others by example. They usually don't show any mystic powers. They behave as an ordinary person and teaching the others, all the other mortal beings like us, how you have to tolerate the onslaught. There could be physical anxiety, diseases, heart attacks, or financial troubles, or any other difficulty. But how you have to push forward the preaching mission and tolerate all the difficulties. And now he was giving the most important lesson which we all have to undergo, how to successfully die, absorbing ourselves in the thoughts of Krishna. That is a conclusion of all spiritual life that we follow. But the disciples of Srila Prabhupada requested him to please stay, and Srila Prabhupada deferred his final instruction. And he allowed this not only for a few, but whosoever came to Vrindavan, an unparalleled opportunity to serve him in pure and simple love. Another very important duty, Srila Prabhupada, as he would later confide in that, it is my duty to make you all more and more attached to me. When George Harrison once sent bouquet of flowers and many fruits, and it was either the appearance day or disappearance day of Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada became very happy and appreciated his sentiment. And he told, if a person can develop love for the spiritual master, then very quickly he can develop love for Krishna. And who can develop love for spiritual master? Spiritual master only has to train. This spiritual technique, all the spiritual technique disciples learn from the spiritual master. So it is another very important duty of spiritual master to make the disciples more and more attached to him. Because unless one attaches himself to spiritual master, Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttamagati Je Prasade Pure Sarva Asha. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. We have desires, we want to become pure devotee. We have a desire, we want to relish the chanting of holy name, like Rup Goswami is desiring. When will I have this one tongue is not sufficient, these ears are not sufficient. When will I have millions of tongues and ears? Then I will be able to relish the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So when will I be able to relish Hare Krishna Mahamantra? When will I be able to see Krishna face to face? We have all such spiritual desires. And how such desires are fulfilled? All such desires are fulfilled by Sri Guru Charane Rati. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. So the spiritual master also has to teach the disciples how to become attached to spiritual master. And this attachment is not sentimental like the attachments of this material world. A disciple has to become very, very sincere in rendering service to the spiritual master. Work very hard, do sacrifices, and thus such attachment is awakened. So Srila Prabhupada deferred giving his final instruction so that the disciples can develop attachment to him by serving in his final days. So when the spiritual master is taking care in the final days, this is a very great opportunity. And it is told that Ishwar Puri, the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself. And what would be the position of spiritual master of God himself? God has accepted somebody as spiritual master. So how Ishwar Puri was able to attain such a position? It is told by sincere service to Madhavendra Puri, his spiritual master, when he was concluding his pastimes like Srila Prabhupada is doing here. And another disciple, he lost his spiritual life. Ramchandra Puri became impersonalist because he offended spiritual master in his final days. So similarly, Prabhupada recommends that sometimes disciple who is personally serving spiritual master's body may become familiar. So there is a great danger. They may take spiritual master as an ordinary person. But he is never an ordinary person. Spiritual master is never under the laws of nature. Padma Purana says, Guru Shu Narmati Naraki Saha. If you consider spiritual master under the control of material nature, Narmati, like an ordinary human being, that is hellish intelligence. No. If spiritual master does everything on his own, he can fly in there, he can do everything, no disease can harm him, how the disciples would be able to render any service? How disciples would be able to develop anxiety for the spiritual master? This is how Krishna comes and stands in one place as a deity in the altar. No, if you don't open my darshan, I cannot come and give darshans. If you do not feed me, I will stay here. I cannot come and eat. So thus he keeps on standing in one place so that devotees can learn how to take anxiety and thus increase attachment for Krishna. So just like Krishna behaves as stone standing in the altar of the temple, similarly, spiritual master behaves like an ordinary person so that disciples get a chance to serve him. Otherwise, everything is being done by the spiritual potency of the spiritual master only. So thus, Srila Prabhupada wanted to promote disciples on the level of very strong attachment towards him. Thus, he deferred giving the final instruction. Many came and all were allowed to enter Srila Prabhupada's room. Earlier it was restricted, but now everybody was open to meet Prabhupada. Massage his body and sit with him as long as they liked, day and night, chanting the holy name for his pleasure. Srila Prabhupada also recommended his translating, and this was done openly. Earlier Prabhupada would do it alone, nobody was allowed. But now everybody could be around when he was translating. Whereas previously he had always worked in solitude, he now encouraged all devotees to come as he lay in bed dictating his Bhakti Vedanta purports. So you see the logics given by Prabhupada in his books. They are so striking. And I met one of the very senior scientists of our country. And he visited our temple in Bangalore many years ago. And when he got the book Life Comes from Life, so Prabhupada launches very scathing comments on the scientists, how they are cheating people. So when he read that book, he admitted, difficult to digest. He used very strong words. But when I read those statements, everything was making so much sense. How we are committing a great blunder. So Prabhupada books are so logical, so profound. So if we have to write any literature like that, we have to be in best of health and in the peak of consciousness. Great clarity and calmness of mind is required. But Prabhupada is dictating the same purports, having same clarity of logic, but in a state which is very, very painful. This indicated the transcendental nature of Srila Prabhupada. Whereas previously he had always worked in solitude, he now encouraged all disciples to come as he lay in bed dictating his Bhaktivedanta purports. A devotee would softly read the Sanskrit text to him, while another held a microphone to his mouth. His voice, sometimes barely audible, Srila Prabhupada would speak. Awestruck, The disciples watched their spiritual master work as their spiritual master worked. His thoughts were clear. He cited from memory references from various scriptures, and his philosophical exposition was rigorous. Prabhupada was giving himself completely and declaring it also, telling the devotees present, "Never leave me, and I cannot live without your company." They had asked him to stay, and he had agreed, consigning himself completely to their care. Those who were blessed to have this service felt themselves passing over all barriers of reluctance to serve, as well as all barriers of material desire. By intimately serving Srila Prabhupada, they felt the strength of complete surrender and sensed that this would sustain them always, even when Srila Prabhupada eventually did depart from the world. Prabhupada also continued speaking as he had in recent months about being unafraid of death and being fixed in transcendental knowledge. When receiving a presentation of some of his books, recently printed in Portuguese by Hridayanand Goswami, Prabhupada encouraged him and said, "This is life. This material world, the material world is just bones. The bones are not a real life. A real concern is the living force. The bones may remain or go, it doesn't matter. The real life is sustaining the bones." There is even a history that there was a rishi who had only bones. So there is a science by which you can sustain life by only bones. Hiranyakashipu did it. "You are also doing it, Srila Prabhupada," Tamal Krishna said. "So, take care of the bones as long as possible," said Prabhupada. "But the real life is here, always remember that. The material world means we are simply all protecting bones and flesh together, but they have no knowledge of what they are." And when Atreya Rishi visited Srila Prabhupada and asked that he visit Tehran, Prabhupada said he was ready to go, but now you have to take a bundle of bones. These were, of course, the same themes that Prabhupada has always taught, the same themes that were in his books, but the lessons were more poignant and striking when Prabhupada applied them to his own situation. More than one devotee compared Prabhupada to Bhishma Dev, who gave important instructions on his last days. As Bhishma felt no pain and delivered learned and loving discourses even from his bed of arrows, and as Bhishma determined by his own free will the time of his departure from the world, so Srila Prabhupada spent his last days oblivious to his physical condition, defying death, and instructing his spiritually innocent sons. So just like Bhishma is lying on the bed of arrows, but he is not feeling the pain and is giving most important lessons. Similarly, Kaviraj told that it is difficult to imagine how Prabhupada is living in this condition. There is no flesh in his body, only bones against the nerves. And it is extremely painful situation, he told, when nerves are just directly resting on the bones. And how Prabhupada is maintaining his calm, it is impossible to comprehend. So it was as painful as lying on the bed of arrows. But just like Bhishma is imparting instructions completely undisturbed, he has choice to leave at his own will. Similarly, Prabhupada displayed this. Without eating, without drinking anything, Prabhupada continued to live and imparting the most important instructions, maintaining perfect memory, perfect eloquence, and very sound logic. Prabhupada had accepted their affection when they had cried for him to stay with them. And now they wanted to express that affection in the only way they understood, a world with Srila Prabhupada living and talking with them, laughing or reprimanding them as he liked. They wanted him to eat and drink and become physically strong again. But again Srila Prabhupada seemed to change, and he began refusing food and drink. He had postponed his passing away to exchange lovingly with his disciples. And yet at the same time, by refusing to eat or drink, he was showing his preference for passing away. He admitted when pressed that it was an impossible course of action to live without food or drink, nor did he expect or want miracles. If he was to get better, it would be by taking nourishment, but for reasons of his own he would not eat. He said recovery was material and that he did not want it. He kept closely in tune with the will of Krishna, allowing the holy name to sustain him. The doctors who came were often puzzled, but those who were Vaishnavas understood and respected his prerogative. Prabhupada's servants made anxiety-filled attempts to induce Prabhupada to take regular treatment, but Prabhupada preferred to take only Kirtan and Bhagavatam. while at the same time sustaining a willingness to live. He empathized with his disciples' anxiety and patiently explained the puzzling situation they were in. He wanted their care and he allowed them to try to treat him, knowing that it was bringing them more and more into a surrender of love. But gradually it became more clear that Krishna's will was indicating Prabhupada's departure. Srila Prabhupada, Bhavanand coaxed, always working on the assumption that Prabhupada could stay if he wanted. Your presence on this planet is the only thing that is keeping the onslaught of the Kali Yuga from really taking effect. We have no idea even what will happen if you leave. It is not in my hands, said Srila Prabhupada, with perfect clarity of consciousness. Krishna, Balaram, he spoke 2 words. Srila Prabhupada always spoke clearly, logically, and with complete devotion to Krishna. Up until the last, he dealt with practical matters, forming a Bhaktivedanta Swami Charity Trust for reconstructing ancient temples in Bengal and arranging final details regarding ISKCON properties and monies. Through all dealings, he stayed always alert, and he absorbed himself in Kirtan and Bhagavatam. But it became obvious to his disciples that despite his promise, he was again moving inevitably towards giving the final lesson. He was teaching that love was beyond death, and a disciple's love could call the spiritual master back to the world to stay, and that a pure devotee has the ability to stay in the world beyond his allotted time. Meanwhile, however, he was progressing steadily to the final point. The devotees did not feel angry with him or cheated that he was doing so. He had told them that he had free will given by Krishna, and they also by their free will had asked him to stay and he had agreed, but they knew he was not obliged. If despite their prayers Lord Krishna was telling Srila Prabhupada that he should come back home, back to Godhead, what could they do but accept? If Srila Prabhupada was accepting, then they would accept also. Nothing, however, could change the fact of their surrendered love. It had now become a solid pact that could not be vanquished by any material changes. They had passed the test of eternal loving service, and that could not be taken away by death. Up until then, there were interludes of sweetness as well as displays of Prabhupada's indomitable mood of fighting for Krishna. One day, Prabhupada's sister Pishima arrived unexpectedly, and Prabhupada asked her to cook khichdi. At that time, Kirtanananda was trying to put Prabhupada on the road to recovery by gradually increasing his liquids, and Kirtanananda and other devotees opposed the idea of his suddenly eating solid foods, but Srila Prabhupada insisted. It doesn't matter what she cooks, does good to me or bad, said Srila Prabhupada. She is a Vaishnavi, it will be good for me. He then began speaking in an extremely humble way. Now this is another phase of Srila Prabhupada. Probably I became a little puffed up because of my opulence and success, he said. Now God has shattered that pride. If you don't have your body, what is there to be puffed up about? Bhakti Charu protested, Srila Prabhupada, whatever you have done for Krishna. That may be, but in this world, unknowingly you commit offenses. When Pishima heard this, she exclaimed, No, he never committed any offense. You cannot ever commit offenses, said Bhakti Charu. You are God's very dear one. How can you commit offenses? I am little temperamental, said Srila Prabhupada. I used to use words like rascal and so on. I never compromised. They used to call it a club in one hand and a Bhagavatam in the other. That is how I preach. Anyway, make arrangements for my sister. There were also visits from Srila Prabhupada's god brothers, and again Prabhupada asked forgiveness for his offenses. One time, Nishkinchan Krishnadas Babaji, Puri Maharaj, Ashram Maharaj, Anand Prabhu, Purushottam Brahmachari, and about 20 others came and sat next to Prabhupada's bed. He was resting when they arrived, and they joined the kirtan until he awoke. When he saw them, he asked to be raised up. Sitting in the center of his bed with his god brothers all around, he addressed them. All over the world, there is a beautiful field to preach Krishna consciousness, he said. I didn't care whether I would be successful or not, people are willing to take. They are all taking also. If you preach together, the saying of Mahaprabhu, Prithivite, will come true. We have everything. Spread the holy name and distribute prasadam. There is a beautiful field. In Africa, in Russia, everywhere they are accepting. When Prabhupada began asking his god brothers to forgive him, they protested. You are the eternal leader, one of them asserted. You rule over us, guide us, and chastise us. Forgive all my offenses, Prabhupada repeated. I became proud of all my opulence. No, said Puri Maharaj, you never became proud. When you started preaching, opulence and success followed you. What was the blessing of? That was the blessing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. There cannot be any question of your being offensive. When Srila Prabhupada presented himself as Mahapatit, greatly fallen, Puri Maharaj did not accept it. You have saved millions of people around the world, he said. Therefore, there is no question of offenses. But you should be called Mahapatit Pavan, the great savior of the fallen. Prabhupada's disciples regarded Prabhupada's asking for his god brother's forgiveness as a manifestation of his humility, but they were also puzzled. Certainly, Prabhupada's god brothers were sincere in saying Prabhupada had committed no offense. Whatever he had done for Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada was also sincere in asking for forgiveness. That was the beautiful gem of his humility, to ask everyone for forgiveness. Actually, this is the mood of Uttam Adhikari. So there are 3 stages in devotional service. Kanishta Adhikari, neophyte stage, to which most of the devotees belong. Then advanced stage called intermediate stage, Madhyam Adhikari, an extremely rare stage called Uttam Adhikari. And what is a quality, unique feature of Uttam Adhikari? It is mentioned in Updeshamrita by Rup Goswami. He is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. And Uttam Adhikari does not preach also. Preaching is usually meant for Madhyam Adhikaris. Madhyam Adhikari learns to discriminate. Neophyte is less intelligent, not very clear about Shastras. He cannot exactly understand who is God, what is position of God, who is a devotee, who is non-devotee, who is envious, who is innocent man. But Madhyam Adhikari can clearly understand who is God, who is devotee, who is innocent, who is envious. And he preaches to the innocent people. But Uttam Adhikari becomes so elevated in his consciousness that he feels everybody is already serving Krishna, only I am not serving Krishna. Thus he cannot criticize others. So spiritual world is meant for such people who are having such consciousness, when they feel everybody is devotee, only I am not devotee. I am the most fallen person in the world. That is called highest stage of Krishna consciousness. And thus, because he thinks I am the most fallen person, most rotten, everybody else is better than me, then how you can preach? So these devotees do not preach, and they are completely devoid of propensity to criticize others. But sometimes such Uttam Adhikaris, just like Lord Krishna, he comes and preaches, they come down to a lower platform. They give up the ecstasy of this extraordinary consciousness. Actually, ecstasy is not in thinking that I am boss, I have become ruler of the world. That does not give ecstasy, but gives anxiety. The real ecstasy, spiritual ecstasy, is felt by a person who is most humble. Tranadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna amanina manadena. A person who is able to have the consciousness of being more humbler than the grass and more tolerant than the tree, who does not expect any honor for himself and gives all respect to others. Only such a person can relish the chanting of holy name. So we wonder when we can relish the holy name. Holy name can be relished only by a person who is extremely humble. So now none of us are humble because we are not surrendering to Krishna. Krishna is telling Saradharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja, surrender unto me. Give up all other false engagements which for your temporary enjoyment you have created in this material world. But we don't surrender to Krishna. So we are not humble. We are telling, no Krishna, I will make plans for my life. Because we are worried. I want to be respected from others. If I lose my salary, if I lose my position in society, what others will speak of me? We cannot tolerate being disrespected in society. But when a person has this consciousness, he does not want any honor in the society, but he wants to give all honor to others. This is called humility. Then he can completely surrender to Krishna, become obedient to Krishna. Humbler than the grass, tolerant than the tree. Such a person can relish the chanting of holy names of Krishna. So such a devotee does not preach anybody, and he always begs forgiveness. And thus, this is how Srila Prabhupada is expressing here. He's telling, I became proud. He always thinks that I have all the bad qualities. I became proud. I got success, opulence, and wealth. So I was criticizing everybody as a Madhyamadikari, as on the platform of preacher. Unless you tell this thing is bad, this thing is good, how you can preach and save your disciples from the things which are bad? So an Uttamadikari leaves this ecstasy and comes to the platform of Madhyamadikari, just like a grown-up man can speak in a broken voice to relate with the children. But that man's voice is not broken, but he's talking like that. In a similar fashion, Uttamadikari behaves like a Madhyamadikari, but he has not become Madhyamadikari. But now Prabhupada, because there is no need of preaching, there is no need of chastising others as spiritual master, one must chastise the students so that they are on the right track, they are disciplined. But now there was no need. So Prabhupada was not chastising disciples at all. Prabhupada was not criticizing anybody, but Prabhupada was begging forgiveness whichever person he could meet, thus displaying the extraordinary, his real position of Uttamadikari. For the purpose of preaching, displaying this gem had not always been the most effective way to spread the merciful teachings of Lord Krishna in every town and village, but now it could be displayed. In London and now in Vrindavan, Prabhupada was showing his disciples extra affection and gratitude without the reprimands usually necessary in training disciples. This attitude of complete humility was a symptom of the highest stage of devotional life. On November 14, 1977, at 7:30 p.m., in his room at the Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada gave his final instruction by leaving this mortal world and going back to Godhead. His departure was exemplary because his whole life was exemplary. His departure marked the completion of a lifetime of pure devotional service to Krishna. A few days before the end, Srila Prabhupada had said he was instructing as far as he could, and his secretary had added, "You are the inspiration." Yes, Srila Prabhupada had replied, "That I shall do until the last breathing." Prabhupada's last breathing was glorious, not because of any last-minute mystical demonstration, but because Srila Prabhupada remained in perfect Krishna consciousness. Like grandfather Bhishma Dev, he remained completely collected and noble and grave, teaching until the end. He was preaching that life comes from life, not from matter, and he was showing that one should preach with every breath he has. The many devotees who crowded the large room bore witness that up to the very end, Prabhupada remained exactly the same. There was nothing suddenly incongruous with what he had previously shown and taught them. At the time of his departure, therefore, he was teaching how to die by always depending on Krishna. Prabhupada's passing away was peaceful. During the evening of November 14, the Kaviraj asked him, "Is there anything you want?" And Prabhupada replied faintly, "Kuch ichha nahi." I have no desire. His passing away was in the perfect situation in Vrindavan with devotees. A few months previously, a young girl, the daughter of one of Prabhupada's disciples, had passed away in Vrindavan. And when Srila Prabhupada had been asked if she went back to Godhead to personally associate with Krishna, he had said, "Yes, anyone who leaves his body in Vrindavan is liberated." Of course, Vrindavan also means the state of pure consciousness. As Advaita Acharya had said of Lord Chaitanya, wherever you are is Vrindavan. And this was also true of Srila Prabhupada. Had Srila Prabhupada passed away in London, New York, or Moscow, therefore his destination would have been the same. Death means the soul cannot stand to live in the body anymore. Whatever the material cause may be, the situation has become unbearable for the soul. Then only soul leaves the body, when the situation becomes unbearable. And leaving the body causes great distress. The Shastra therefore advise us to get free from the cycle of repeated birth and death. Meeting an inauspicious death and being dragged down to a lower birth is the most fearful thing for the living being. So fearful it is that we may try to ignore death altogether. Death is painful because the eternal spirit soul is placed in a most unnatural situation. Although he is eternal and should not have to die, he is forced to die because of his connection with the material body. At death, the eternal soul is forced to leave the body for a destination he knows not. Thus, he is full of fear and suffering. The pain and fear is usually overwhelming. and one thinks of only material attachments or bodily pain. Therefore, King Kulashekar prayed, and Prabhupada often quoted, "Please let me pass away not in some prolonged contemplation of my bodily death, but just while I am chanting Hare Krishna. If I can meditate on you and then pass from this body, that will be perfection." Over the last months of his life in this world, Srila Prabhupada taught how it is possible to meet death step by step in Krishna consciousness. In his last days, he told one of his sannyasis, "Don't think this isn't going to happen to you." So Prabhupada wanted to indicate, you are seeing my situation. Do not think this is not going to happen to you. It will happen to all of us. So we have to lead a life in perfect Krishna consciousness, become pure devotee as soon as possible to lead a perfect death also. Prabhupada came into this world on Krishna's request to teach us how to live a pure life of Krishna consciousness, and that includes how to finally pass away from this world to attain eternal life. Prabhupada underwent death in a way that was perfect and glorious, and at the same time in a way which we can all follow. When we have to go, we can cling to the memory of how a great soul left his body, always thinking of Krishna, surrounding himself with the medicine of chanting Hare Krishna, always desiring to hear about Krishna and practicing detachment from the misery of material condition. This last lesson was one of the most wonderful and important instructions Srila Prabhupada gave us. He taught by his life, by his books, and at the end by his dying. Education in how to die is meant specially for the human being. An animal dies and a human being also dies. But a human being is supposed to understand the process of going back to the spiritual world at the time of death, remaining always fixed and undisturbed in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada expertly taught the process. His passing away, therefore, was a perfect lesson and one that can be faithfully followed. While there was nothing lamentable for Srila Prabhupada in his departing from the world and going back to Godhead, it was certainly lamentable for his followers and for the people of the whole world who became bereft of the presence of their greatest well-wisher and benefactor. Srila Prabhupada had written in a Srimad Bhagavatam purport, "When the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, the disciple should cry exactly like the queen cries when the king leaves his body." At the departure of his own spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada had written, "On that day, O my master, I made a cry of grief. I was not able to tolerate the absence of you, my Guru." And so, on November 14, 1977, as the powerful news spread around the world, those who knew and loved Srila Prabhupada were gripped by a fearful, unrestricted grief. They saw everything around them in the overwhelming atmosphere of separation from Srila Prabhupada. They turned for solace to Srila Prabhupada's books. So as Srila Prabhupada mentioned in his books, However, the disciples and the spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. So for the spiritually perfect personalities, like Lord Krishna, they are on the absolute platform. They are always present on the absolute plane. And thus the disciple who realizes such absolute nature can learn the art of associating with spiritual master in his another form of that of Vani. Vani means the instructions. So it is not that Srila Prabhupada is not present with us. He is present, but he is not present in the physical form that was manifest till November 14, 1977. But Srila Prabhupada is present. And Srila Prabhupada's passing away is lamentable, and the devotee must cry, disciple should cry, feeling the separation of the spiritual master on the disappearance day. But at the same time, on the spiritual platform, this is another boon for the disciples. Boon in the sense, the disciple, just like Lord Krishna, when he left Vrindavan, with a promise to come back, but Krishna never came back. So actually it was a favor to all the Vrajavasis. So in spiritual life, there are various grades of mellows that a person experiences. It starts with Shantarasa, the mellow of neutrality, which the rivers, stones, trees of Vrindavan experience with Krishna. Then it grows till Madhurya Rasa, the topmost pleasure of spiritual life. And in Madhurya Rasa also, there are two kinds of rasas. And one is called Swakiya Rasa and Parkiya Rasa, the mellow of conjugal relationship in marriage and without marriage. Without marriage is more relishable. And in that also, there are two kinds of mellows. The mellow of associating with Krishna in his physical presence and mellow of associating with Krishna in his physical absence, in separation. And this mellow which a devotee experiences in separation from Krishna, this is called Vipralambha Bhav. Vipralambha means when the object of love is not present physically, then the devotee feels so much intense pain in separation that the devotee is completely absorbed in the thoughts of his beloved, Lord Krishna or the spiritual master. And such an intense absorption, this pain of separation, is actually the source of transcendental ecstasy. And this is the extraordinary, the summit of all the spiritual pleasures. The Vipralambha Bhav is what is given, handed down to the disciples in this extraordinary parampara of which we are part of, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Lord Krishna came as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to pass on this highest form of spiritual ecstasy of worshipping Krishna in separation. So when Krishna did not come back to Vrajavasis, it was not a punishment. Rather, it was a greatest favor, because they were experiencing Krishna's presence always by feeling his physical absence. In a similar fashion, Srila Prabhupada also gave this mellow to all his disciples of serving him in his physical absence. And thus they were able to very strongly feel the presence of Prabhupada in serving him in separation. So this extraordinary mood can be relished now, and thus everybody can take advantage of Srila Prabhupada's association in his physical separation. But service of spiritual master is very important. Tad vidhi pranipaten pariprashnena sevaya. Without engaging in service of spiritual master, there is no advancement in spiritual life. So how spiritual master can be served now that his physical body is not there? As Prabhupada has mentioned in the Bhagavatam, when spiritual master is present, one can serve his physical body, and when he is no longer existing in his physical body, the disciple can serve Vani form of the spiritual master. And that is more important. So serving the instructions, very, very strictly following the instructions of the spiritual master, means association with the spiritual master. So spiritual master and the disciple are not separated. And Srila Prabhupada wrote many letters to this effect, that physically present or not, I will remain your personal guide. So Srila Prabhupada is a person. He has got his free will. And Srila Prabhupada can be always pleased by the disciple who is very strict in following the instructions. The relationship is eternal. Chakshudan dilo jai, janme janme Prabhu say. Life after life, you are my spiritual master. So whenever the disciple takes birth, either to finish his unfinished spiritual life, like it happened with Bilva Mangal Thakur, his spiritual master again spoke through the prostitute in the next life to make his spiritual life perfect. So life after life, spiritual master guides, or if the disciple takes birth again to assist in preaching mission of the spiritual master in the material world. But spiritual master always remains the spiritual master of the disciple. This is eternal relationship, life after life. And spiritual master always keeps guiding personally the disciple, as he guided Bilva Mangal Thakur and numerous other devotees life after life. So physical absence is immaterial in that sense. But disciple should lament. By such lamentation, the disciple is able to experience the extraordinary mellows of the spiritual master, of relationship, of serving spiritual master in his physical absence. So we should try to follow his instructions very nicely. Prabhupada mentions spiritual master is not the body, spiritual master is a spiritual personality. And he may guide through material body, he may guide through Vani body, he may guide in any other form. He can guide through any materialist also. Spiritual master can choose any ways and means of guiding the disciple. So Prabhupada explains in one of the letters to the disciple, it is just like the principle of relay monitoring. So although an event is happening in one place through television by relay monitoring, the event can be witnessed in many places. So just like Lord Krishna can be present simultaneously in millions of places, similarly, spiritual master can also be present wherever a disciple wants the association of spiritual master. So as long as we follow strictly the instructions, we can avail the facility of associating with the spiritual master. So thus I request all of you, let us try to follow the instructions very, very strictly. We have to practice complete surrenderance to Krishna. One day we have to follow completely the instructions of spiritual master. So why to delay? So material world is very attractive for everybody, but unless we practice complete detachment from anything which attracts us to material enjoyment, we will not be liberated. The same attachments which tell us to postpone spiritual life, these attachments will only go strong as the time passes. Material attachments, addictions never become weak on their own. So one day we have to practice detachment if we have to go back to Godhead, place of eternal life. So let us without delay try to follow immediately and surrender completely to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna following their instructions. And as we can see, even in his final days, the thing which was giving delight to Prabhupada was publishing, distributing his books. That will save the world. So Prabhupada told, I will live from my books and you will utilize. So Prabhupada is living in his books. So I request all of you on this 125th appearance day of Srila Prabhupada, let us try to sincerely devote ourselves to distribute Srila Prabhupada books. Prabhupada's desire is every house should have complete Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita with them. That will save the whole world. That will change the atmosphere of the entire world. Automatically devotees will come out. So let us try to, we have at least some friends, some relatives, let us tell them this is Vedic encyclopedia. Please keep in your house. You will get benefited. You can take for your parents. You can give to your children. And thus any sensible man would agree to take it. At least in our place we can have it. So I request that at least if you do not have, you can have Srimad Bhagavatam set and Chaitanya Charitamrita for your own self. At least Srimad Bhagavatam set to begin with. So now we have our website online store of books also ready by the name prabhupadstore.com. So our devotees have worked very hard for the last couple of days. My gratitude to all of the devotees. And such hard work pleases Prabhupada like anything and Lord Krishna. And naturally we are able to remember Srila Prabhupada and Krishna within the heart. So Srila prabhupadstore.com is the website. And as you go to the page, you can find we have books of many languages, all the languages. And if you scroll down, you can see the best-selling books, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Of course, we'll be posting the links you can find in the description also. So you can just click on the links of the description, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and please try to have it for your own self. Let us try to please Prabhupada, at least by this small seva, and eventually we can tell all other of our contacts, they can also keep these books in their house. So simply if we have Prabhupada's presence in the form of books in all the households, that will be the greatest service to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. So that was the final pastime. I thank all of you for being in this journey, for remembering the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. And these pastimes are very, very important to remember because as we discussed, when we develop attachment for Prabhupada, for spiritual master, then automatically very soon we develop attachment for Krishna. So please again, as we discuss always, please share your realizations in the comments box and try to like this video and also try to share it. This will help us to take this video to many, many more people. And now we have Janmashtami coming up, followed by Vyas Puja. So please try to follow these festivals nicely by fasting and chanting and hearing as much as possible throughout the day. And I request the devotees, even after Prabhupada's Lila, our association has not stopped. We will continue with our Bhagavad Gita classes, which happen every Wednesday and Saturday over Zoom. So if you like to connect with us for the Bhagavad Gita session, you can please mention in the comments and our team will connect back with you. Or you can mail us. Our email ID also is shown in the description. So please try to join us for Bhagavad Gita sessions every Wednesday and Saturday. And also you can be part of our Bhakti Vraksha program, in which in small group of devotees, we discuss Bhagavad Gita every day. That helps a great deal in spiritual advancement. Thank you so much for this wonderful journey together in remembering Srila Prabhupada. We'll meet again with more wonderful pastimes. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.